The story you're about to hear is sensitive and hard to listen to. If you follow our channel, you know we like to uplift, empower, and bring truth. But part of truth is also facing what's uncomfortable. We'll avoid unnecessary detail, but the reality itself may still be hard to hear. Real people are being affected, and they rarely get to be heard or seen. That's why we decided to bring their story. In Peru, entire villages have been living in fear. People say humanoid figures appear at night flying on strange platforms, like hoverboards. They try to grab people, drag them away. Some who escaped describe strange attempts to harm them, and others didn't make it back. Their bodies were discovered under disturbing circumstances. Locals call them face peelers. Authorities call it superstition. They say it's just miners or gangs trying to scare people. But let's be honest. Does that explanation make sense? Do miners ride hoverboards? Do gangs surgically remove faces and vanish into the night? Of course not. So the question isn't whether the attacks are real. They are. The question is, who's behind them? And why? Because if you strip away the excuses, you find a pattern that connects to cattle mutilations, to abduction stories, to technology the public isn't supposed to know exists. This isn't folklore. This isn't miners. This is something older and something far more disturbing. This is unredacted. Authorities say the same thing every time. It's just miners. It's gangs. It's superstition. That's the official line. And on the surface, it sounds reasonable until you actually think about it. Miners don't have hoverboards, gangs don't fly through the air, and criminals don't risk exposure by harming bodies in ways that scream not human. If it were just gangs, you'd see bullets, chaos. If it were miners, you'd see threats, maybe kidnappings for ransom, but you wouldn't see precision cutting of faces. You wouldn't see people describing flying platforms. You wouldn't see entire villages terrified of beings that vanish into the night. And superstition? That's the easiest excuse of all. Call it myth, and you never have to investigate. But here's the problem. The details keep repeating. The same kind of attackers, the same kind of alterations, the same kind of fear. Superstition doesn't fly on advanced craft. Superstition doesn't leave behind bodies with surgical alterations. So when you strip away the excuses, you're left with this. The official explanations don't fit. They never did. And if you look past the cover stories, you find something far more disturbing hiding underneath. The story may have risen to notability in 2023, but its roots stretch back for centuries. Ask anyone in the Andes about the Pixtacos. For generations, villagers told stories of tall, pale figures who came at night. They said these beings harvested fat from people, sometimes leaving them alive, sometimes not. To outsiders, it sounded like superstition. But now, look at what's happening again. Humanoid figures, attacking villagers, harvesting tissue. Different details, same pattern. People in the 1500s and people today are describing the same thing. You're not dealing with imagination. You're looking at continuity. The technology may look new, flying platforms instead of boots in the dirt. But the agenda hasn't changed. Harvest humans. Take what they came for. Disappear before anyone can stop them. The old Pixtaco stories weren't just myths to scare children. They were witness testimony before we had the words to describe advanced technology. Back then it was strangers with blades. Today it's face peelers on hoverboards. But it's the same phenomenon repeating for centuries. And if it's been repeating that long, the real question isn't, are they real? It's who is behind these attacks and who has been letting this happen for hundreds of years. So who are these beings? People say they look human, but not quite. Too tall, too thin, faces that don't look natural, close enough to pass as human in the dark, but off just enough to terrify anyone who sees them. That's because they're not fully human. They're hybrids. Here's what that means, plain and simple. A hybrid is a body created in a lab, made by mixing human DNA with DNA from another species. In this case, the other comes from a parasitic ET faction, insectoid in resonance, cold, hive-like, and emotionless. They can't survive long on Earth in their own form, so instead they splice their genetics with ours. How do they do it? They take human cells, blood, reproductive material, tissue samples, and combine them with their own DNA. This is genetic engineering, not science fiction. Real science, just decades ahead of what the public is told, exists. The result? A body that looks mostly human, but functions like a controlled vessel. These hybrids can breathe our air, eat our food, move among us. But inside, they're wired with the agenda of their creators. And that's exactly what villagers describe. Humanoids that look off. Human enough to walk, grab, and attack, but not human enough to feel empathy. They're not here to live among us. They're here to do a job. Harvest, collect, disappear. So when people ask, how can they look human but not be human? This is the answer. They're hybrids, built to survive here, built to obey, built to harvest. But harvesting isn't the full story, because behind every operation there are humans too. Agents, soldiers, scientists working in the shadows. Which raises the question, if these beings are so advanced, why do they even need humans? Because they've lost what we still have. They can't create, they can't evolve, they can't walk among us without help. That's why they partner with humans, through secret black projects hidden from the world. What's a black project? It's a program so secret, it doesn't officially exist. No public budget, no oversight, billions funneled into hidden labs and underground bases where anything can happen without accountability. Inside those projects, humans and parasitic factions trade. The parasites get what they want, access to human DNA, tissues, fear energy, and in return, the cabal running these projects gets what they want, technology. Some of it comes from reverse engineering, crashed craft, recovered tech, even ruins in ancient sites like the Andes and Antarctica. Pieces of machines humans were never supposed to have, but humans couldn't figure it out on their own. That's where the parasitic ETs stepped in, helping just enough so humans could copy parts of their tech. That's why we see platforms that look like hoverboards, advanced compared to anything public, but clunky compared to what benevolent star families use. It's why villagers describe frequency weapons that freeze their bodies, or chemical compounds that numb them in seconds. This is reverse-engineered tech, seeded and supervised by parasitic allies. One survivor said the attackers smeared a cream on her face before trying to cut it. That wasn't random. It was a paralytic compound, designed to seep into the skin, shut down the nerves, and leave the body limp. Others describe suddenly feeling frozen, unable to move. That's directed frequencies scrambling the nervous system. And layered on top is the fear projection, hijacking the human freeze response until you're paralyzed in terror. Chemicals, frequencies, psychological suppression, 3 layers of immobilization. That's not minors. That's not drug dealers. That's black project science decades ahead of what the public knows. And then there's the detail no one can explain away. Talia, the girl that survived the attack, said, one of the attackers spoke with an American accent. Ask yourself, what alien speaks English with an American accent? The answer is simple. Some of these operators aren't aliens. They're human agents, part of the projects, working side by side with hybrids. Hybrids can mimic speech, but not like that. That accent was human, and not just any human. It ties these operations back to the U.S., the cabal, and the very projects that have been running these programs for decades. So when people ask, Why would humans work with them? The answer is power. Tech is the currency. And for those at the top, trading human lives for control of forbidden technology is a deal they're willing to make. So who exactly are these non-human beings working through the projects? They're not aliens, the way people imagine. And they're definitely not the benevolent star families, not Pleiadians, not Andromedans, not the ones who guide and uplift. We need to be clear about this. These are a parasitic faction. They've been called greys, insectoids, hybrids, but labels don't matter as their nature. Cold, hive-like, no empathy, not explorers, not creators, survivors feeding off other species to extend their timeline. Their entire goal is to keep existing, no matter what it costs. They've lost the ability to reproduce naturally. They've lost the ability to evolve on their own, so they harvest what they need from others. That's why humans are so valuable to them. Our DNA is a gold mine. Our glands, endocrine systems, and even emotional energy can be extracted, stored, and used to patch the holes in their own biology. And if you think that sounds extreme, listen to the eyewitness reports. Villagers don't just see men with knives, they see flying platforms in the air. And many times above those platforms, UFOs. Yes, people in these attack zones report strange craft hovering over the jungle. Not glowing starships of the light, but blunt mechanical carriers. Storage vessels for the hybrids and the tools they use. That's the truth most people miss. The face peelers aren't operating alone. They're part of a larger harvest network, supplied and monitored by these parasitic craft. When the attack is over, they don't vanish into thin air. They dock, they load, and they leave. This isn't random crime. This is a structured operation. And the beings behind it don't come with peace. They come to take. Why Peru? Because the Andes are not just mountains. They're part of Earth's ancient power grid, laced with ley lines, portals, and buried technology left from civilizations long before ours. These regions pulse with energy fields that open doors between dimensions. That's why shamans have always called them sacred. And that's why parasitic factions choose them as hunting grounds. For centuries, villagers have spoken about the Pishtacos, pale, tall beings who came at night to harvest humans. When the Spanish arrived, they recorded the same stories. Colonial priests called it myth, but the pattern was already there. Strange beings, precision harvests, fear that lingered for generations. Now in modern times, it's the same land, the same villages, the same kind of attacks. Only now the tools are upgraded, hover platforms, frequency weapons, chemical paralytics. But there's another reason these attacks happen here. Remote communities are easy targets. Few cameras, few outsiders. And when survivors do speak, authorities dismiss them as superstitious villagers. But the deeper reason goes beyond convenience. The Andes are a staging ground. Underground bases are hidden in those mountains. The cabal and their parasitic allies use them as docking stations, storage facilities, and labs. So when you hear Peru, don't think isolated jungle. Think front line. The same way cattle mutilations cluster around ley lines in the U.S., the face peeler operations cluster around Peru's portals and ancient power sites. It's not random. It's chosen. And it's been happening for centuries. What are they really after? Why mutilate cattle? Why go after people's faces? The answer is resources. Not gold, not money. Biological resources. Think about cattle mutilations. For decades, ranchers have found animals with surgical precision cuts, organs missing, and no footprints, no predators, no mess. The same organs and glands show up missing every time. Reproductive, endocrine, fatty tissues. Why? Because those are rich in hormones, DNA, and energy they can't produce themselves. Now compare that to the testimonies in Peru. Survivors describing attackers smearing paralytic cream before cutting. Why the face? Because the face holds exactly what they want. Fatty tissue in the cheeks. endocrine-rich areas near the eyes and jaw, the pineal region near the forehead, a source of biochemical and energetic secretion. It's not random violence, it's targeted harvesting. And just like cattle mutilations, the precision proves it's not gangs or minors. It's surgical, clinical, repeatable. But there's another layer most people miss. It's not only about biology, it's about energy. Fear and trauma release a frequency in the body. When someone is attacked or killed in terror, that frequency saturates the land. It destabilizes the grid, lowers consciousness, and creates exactly the kind of environment parasitic factions thrive in. That's why entire villages can feel haunted after an attack. The fear itself becomes part of the harvest. So cattle give them the raw materials. Humans give them both the biology and the energy. That's why these attacks look so bizarre, so inhuman. Because they are. When villagers cry out for help, authorities always say the same thing. It's superstition. It's gangs. It's minors. Do you really think they believe that? Of course not. The mutilations are too precise. The testimonies too consistent. The fear too real. Police on the ground hear the same reports we do. So why dismiss it? Because that's the script they've been given. It's easier to call villagers superstitious than admit the truth. Something advanced is operating in their skies. And at higher levels, they already know. Governments have been in contact with these factions for decades. Not the public-facing governments, the shadow networks inside them. The ones running the black projects, trading human lives for technology. So when a Peruvian girl says she was paralyzed with a cream and one of her attackers spoke English with an American accent, ask yourself, why wasn't that front page news? Why wasn't that investigated internationally? Because the last thing the cabal wants is for you to connect the dots. If they can convince you it's superstition, you stop asking questions. If they can convince you it's minors, you don't look at the sky. If they can convince you it's gangs, you never trace it back to U.S. black projects and parasitic factions. The cover-up isn't ignorance. It's strategy. Keep the public ridiculing the witnesses while the harvest goes on in the shadows. So let's strip it bare. These aren't myths. They're not minors. They're not gangs. They are hybrids built in black projects, backed by a parasitic eternity faction, and shielded by human authorities who trade your silence for their power. The trade is simple: human lives for forbidden technology. The cover-up is simple: ridicule the witnesses, distract the public, and keep you repeating excuses instead of asking questions. But here's the part they don't want you to realize. The very fact that you're hearing this now means their grip is breaking. Because when the hidden becomes visible, it loses its power. That's why we share these stories. Not to scare you, but to remind you you're stronger than the script. You're part of a much bigger family, and you're waking up. The curtain is lifting. The question isn't, is it real? The question is, how much longer will we let them harvest while we look away? Speak, share, question, because silence is the only shield they have left. This is not entertainment. It's the memory pulled from the field of consciousness itself, the one you'll never find on the internet. This is Unredacted.